I heard another point made in Patrick's discussion about there wasn't anybody in Nevada that had the experience or perhaps the education to do the project that you were trying to complete. Is this a shortcoming of our schools? Is this a shortcoming of the way we do business? What can we do to try to build a basis of local people who can complete these projects so that we are keeping that money here in our state? What can we do for this? Any thoughts here, Ellen or Vicki or Mark or Patrick?
I took that as a challenge. I mean, we all felt terrible sitting there and deciding that there was no local artist that could do the work. Nobody wanted to come to that conclusion. But we were building the first big art project that we would undertake, and we could not afford to have it fail. And if we hired the wrong person and let it fail, that would be the end. So I resolved then that we would start doing some smaller projects and start giving some artists the experience they needed, that they'd be able to do this sort of project later. And so one project we did, we have Wetlands Park, which is, it's the old Las Vegas Wash, which has become so, it was an intermittent stream originally. It would only find its way down to Lake Mead during the spring rains, but now it's swollen with runoff from gutters and runoff from water treatment plants. It's a major river now, and it was allowed to erode. The county intentionally allowed it to erode, creating a catastrophe where they thought it would be a good thing. And so it had to be redone, and we created this Wetlands Park. At the entrance to the Wetlands Park, they made a small neighborhood park for the people who live right around there. And they were going to buy some animals for, some fabricated animals for children to climb on from a national company that manufactures them. And so I argued that we have artists that could do this. Why should we buy it from some company in Omaha or someplace? One important concept of public art that's developed in the last 50 years is the idea of site-specific art. Art that is made to be in one certain place, and it relates to that one place. And that's what we were able to do in this case. We hired a local sculptor by the name of Miguel Rodriguez, and we told him we wanted animals that actually live in Wetlands Park. So he made a California king snake, a beaver that stands 6 feet tall, and Woodhouse's toad, which is a particular toad that lives there. The toad is about 4 feet tall. He had never worked, I mean, I was confident that he could do this. He's a fabulous sculptor. He can sculpt anything. But he had never worked at this size before. He made the pieces out of concrete. He had never worked in concrete before. He decided to use fiberglass molds to mold the statues. He had never worked with fiberglass before. So the learning curve for him was about as steep as it could be, and several times it looked like we were headed for a catastrophe. This is when the boom was still going on, and the first thing he needed was a place where he could work. So he drove all over town looking. He wanted to rent a garage or some kind of a small warehouse he could use. No one would rent him anything unless he took out at least a 3-year lease. So even boom times create their own problems. finally, he went downtown. We have this First Friday organization that does First Fridays downtown, and they had acquired some downtown property, and they had an old building, and they said, you could work here, you could make your pieces here. So he went to work, and he started making the first mold, which was for the toad. And he had it 3/4 made when there was a knock on the door. This was after several days of work. And there was a fireman at the door. And some woman had smelled the fiberglass that he was pouring and called the county. The county sent out the fire department. The fire department said, "Do you have a permit for working with fiberglass?" No. So, okay, no problem. You would go down in the morning and get a permit. And when he got down there and they explained things to him, he found out that he could get a permit if the building were leveled and then rebuilt to the county's specifications with the right kind of air handlers and so forth that would get rid of all the smells. So he had half of one mold made. He had already gone to a fabricating company and asked them if they could make the molds for him. By the way, we paid him $80,000 to do this project. The only way we were able to figure out how to pay him was we made him a subcontractor to the contractor who was building the park. So for handling the money, the contractor took 10% of it for starters. So when Miguel went to this fabrication company, he showed them what he wanted, and they said, yes, this is exactly what we can do. We can make these molds for you. We can do a beautiful jug. You're going to love them. Now, how much is it going to cost? $110,000. So that's why he ended up building them himself. After the fire department shut him down, he was just desperate. I suggested to him that he ought to go out and rent a garage out in Pahrump, where they're not so particular about hazards, air pollution, and so forth. But in fact, they're not particular at all. But finally, he went back to another fabrication company, and they actually agreed to do it for him at a price that he could afford. So he got the molds made by this other company. He had to make all kinds of concessions. They gave him a price lower than they'd ever given anybody, but they liked him, they liked his project, and we told them that we would give them publicity when we dedicated the park, and so that all worked. Then he had to learn how to work with concrete in this way. And as a matter of fact, when he was pouring the concrete, he ran into all kinds of problems, especially with the beaver, which, as I say, was 6 feet tall. He made a hole in the top of the beaver's head of the mold and poured the concrete in that way. But by the time the mold was nearly full of concrete, it was so heavy that it started to split at the seams. So he was running around like a nut, wrapping it in anything he could find to wrap it in. He just barely made it work. But in the end, we got 3 beautiful sculptures that people really love. And Miguel has moved forward, and he's been bidding on some really important public art projects with the city of Las Vegas and with us, and I know he's going to do something really important someday soon. So that's what we've tried to do is create these kind of jobs. And the reason that we didn't have these kinds of people with this kind of experience to begin with is we haven't had this kind of work. If there's not work in a community for an artist, that artist is either not going to come there in the first place, or if they live there, they're going to go away to some place where they can get the work.